Hello, how are you doing? I hope you're staying well and staying at home during these extraordinary times we're living through. I'm back again this evening for another chapter from one of my books. I've just started now reading Breadboy, which is the story of my teenage years, and I'm going to continue with that tonight. So it's just gone 9 o'clock here in Portstewart in Northern Ireland, and I hope wherever you are in the world watching this, that this will bring back a few memories of the 1970s and some connections to Belfast at that time. So this chapter in Breadboy is called Saturday Night Fever at the Westy Disco. Them Bee Gees sing queer high, so they do, said Titch McCracken with a genuine look of amazement on his freckled face as he sucked on a shoplifted curly whirly. Fruits, said Philip Ferris. Saturday Night Fever had exploded onto the upper Shankill. The Bee Gees were shrieking "Staying Alive" at the Westy Disco. My dad, who was the oldest DJ in town, even turned the volume down a little in case we got too close to the enormous speakers on either side of his rickety double decks. Dad got scared after he watched a long documentary on BBC Two about loudspeakers making young people at pop concerts go deaf. He worried that the high pitch of the Bee Gees falsetto, if it did any damage to our tender teenage ears, then the school nurse would pin the blame on him. The old Nissen hut on the West Circular Road was throbbing to the amazing new disco beats from America. There were dangers from bombs and bullets outside, but we were safe with bubblegum and boogie inside. Everyone was talking about Saturday Night Fever and disco dancing and John Travolta. Mrs. Piper said my father, because disco dancing was a sin, as it made you want, told her to catch herself on. Night Fever was sweeping away the Rollers and the Oz and was even keeping ABBA off the #1 spot, even though Benny and Bjorn had tried very hard to copy the Bee Gees with Summer Night City. The hit parade in the Westy Disco was changing too. Night Fever made old dances like the slush look very old-fashioned, and only middle-aged women did it now to Elton John and Kiki Dee at dinner dances and weddings. No one requested the Hucklebuck anymore either, much to my father's disappointment, because it reminded him of the show bands and the dance halls in Belfast where he had fallen in love with my mother in the olden days in the 1950s. But all the wee girls loved them there Bee Gees, and they're millionaires and all, said Titch McCracken. I wish I was a Bee Gee. This was ridiculous. I couldn't imagine anyone in the whole world who was less suitable Bee Gee material than Titch McCracken. Like, are you as thick as champ, wee lad? Said Heather Mateer as she took a break from snogging an accordionist from Rathcoole. You can't be ginger and wee and a Bee Gee. We were all sitting around an old wooden table beside the tuck shop at the Westy Disco. The words UVF, UDA, ABBA, and ACDC were carved one on top of the other, each acronym darker and deeper into the grain of the wood. The tabletop was a battlefield for both paramilitary and pop dominance. Our weapon of choice was the penknife, if Uncle Henry hadn't confiscated it when he searched us for drink at the door. I had declined to participate, not just because I was the only teenage pacifist in West Belfast, but in case Leslie recognised my handwriting and I got sacked. Leslie helped my parents and Uncle Henry and Auntie Emma to clean up the mess at the end of the Westy Disco every Saturday night, so the floor would be clean for Sunday school the next morning. He didn't want the wee children to get their good clothes dirty when they were sitting on the floor colouring in Jesus feeding the 5,000. This cleanup was a major task because the spat out chewing gum of 400 teenagers would stick very stubbornly to the old wooden floor of the Nissen hut. Compacted Wrigley's was almost impossible to remove, like the glue from my Airfix Spitfire model I'd spilled on my mother's good Formica table. The wooden floor of the Westy Disco was covered in thousands of blobs of bubblegum. Some of the gum had hardened, like polyfilla, but other blobs remained sticky and clung to your platform shoes on contact. Every week, after Leslie had scraped chewing gum from the floor, he also inspected the premises for the slightest evidence of new graffiti. On several occasions, he was able to successfully identify the culprit, like when Billy Cooper foolishly scratched "Scoop Rules OK" on the toilet door. It was his nickname and the limited spelling ability that gave him away. I realised that vandalism was incompatible with Leslie's expectations of a good bread boy, so I resisted a persistent urge to express my love for Agnetha in carved form on any wall, door, or table in the Westy Disco. I used the back of my school exercise book as my canvas instead, apart from my chemistry book, because when I was in chemistry class, I had a much more immediately available object of affection. Aye, them's white trousers in the Bee Gees is even tighter than yours, Ginger Bop, my big brother replied to Titch, and then added unnecessarily, "'Cause your old ma can't even afford to buy you a new pair." Titch hit a reddener instantly, and with him being pale and ginger, this was very red indeed. Poor Titch blushed more brightly than anyone else I knew. I usually only blushed when Judy Carton smiled at me, or when Clint Eastwood out in the room in a late film on BBC Two. Titch McCracken hit a reddener at almost any. Let's face it, he did have an awful lot to be embarrassed about. Getting caught stealing sweetie bites from the mace and setting fire to our street's telephone box were just the tip of the iceberg. However, on this occasion, I was on Titch's side. The debt put down from my big brother. It was at times such as this I was tempted to reveal to the whole world that my hard man brother was the same 17-year-old who cried when went blind in Little House on the Prairie. And yet I realised if I dared to expose this shameful my meltdown every day for the next 3 weeks. We had just emptied several packets of potato cheese and onion crisps, and we were washing away the debris from our teeth and braces with brown lemonade from a big sea. The Bee Gees were now screaming night fever in the Nissan. Everyone was up dancing and doing that up and down diagonally pointy thing. It seemed that everyone in the Westie did night fever. Well, nearly everyone. Bee Gees bollocks, grunted Philip Ferris predictably. I wanted to be John Travolta in a white suit dancing in the middle of the floor with all the girls admiring my moves. But they didn't sell any white suits in my size in the Great Universal Club book. So I had to improvise with my old flared jeans that had been washed so many times they were nearly white. I also sported a white capped sleeve t-shirt from John Fraser's in Gresham Street, even though it exposed the fact that I still had no discernible upper arm muscles, in spite of lifting hundreds of loaves every Saturday morning. I heard that the three of them and sing up high like that the whole way through the movie, so they do, Ari Maxwell added, with her usual air of authority on matters of art and culture. Irene got Jackie magazine. "Fucking freaks," was my big brother's musical critique. He was now competing with Philip Ferris for biggest hard man in the group status. Philip responded by taking out his penknife and carving a new word beginning with a P into the much abused tuck shop table. "I want to go and see it because the music's brilliant and your man John," announced Irene Maxwell. "Everyone in my class is going. Are you going?" she inquired. I was a little concerned because as far as I knew, Saturday Night Fever was X-rated and I was worried I might not get in. "Heather Mateer's already been to see it 5 times in the ABC, said Irene. "Aye," confirmed Heather proudly, as she skillfully wound pink chewing gum around her forefinger. The wee lad from Rathcoole was agog at her tongue and finger skills. This movie was becoming a major cultural phenomenon on the Upper Shankill, I had never heard of so many people wanting to go and see a movie since Jaws, and as far as I could tell, no one even got their head bitten off in Saturday Night Fever. I couldn't imagine going to the same movie 5 times, although I had gone to see Jaws twice because it was better when you knew in advance which severed body parts were about to appear under the water. Irene proceeded to provide us with all the vital information she had gleaned from Jackie magazine. John Travolta's dead gorgeous, so he is. He dances in a big disco with flashing lights under the floor in a white suit and a big sparkly mirror ball hanging from the ceiling and all, she explained. Is that it? I inquired. Is there no story? I thought this was a reasonable question now that I was studying The Merchant of BCE. Why's up, wee lad? It's a musical, was Irene's knowledgeable response. Musicals don't have to have stories. At this point, I was tempted to argue with Irene, as I remembered watching White Christmas, and it was a very famous musical, and it definitely had a story. Miss Barron at Belfast Royal Academy had promised we would be doing West Side Story as the school play next year, and I was certain it had a story about gangs and fighting like Belfast. Well, are yous all going to see the bloody film or not? Asked my big brother. Aye, said Irene. My Uncle Sparky says he'll give us a lift to the ABC some Friday night, as long as there's no bombs and we give him 50p for petrol. This was an offer too generous to refuse, and so it was agreed. We would finally get to see the whole film rather than wee bits on top of the pops. My big brother and I, Irene Maxwell, Heather Mateer, Titch and Philip Ferris were going to see the greatest movie of all time. Apart from Star Wars, of course. I would have preferred to go to the cinema with Judy Carton, but I had yet to initiate verbal communication with her, and I assumed her father wouldn't allow her to go to the ABC to see an X-rated movie with a wee lad from up the Shankill. It was Star Wars that I really wanted to see, because I was coming to the conclusion that in spite of Night Fever, I probably wanted to be Luke Skywalker more than I wanted to be John Travolta. All the girls loved John Travolta, but Luke had Princess Leia, who was lovely apart from her funny hairstyle, and no one ever got done in his and hers beside the Shankill graveyard. Once we had decided we were going to see Saturday Night Fever, I had an urge to get up on the dance floor in my nearly white flared jeans and my white t-shirt and dance like John Travolta himself. So before I continue that story, I'll say hello to a few people. Hello, Ali Bennett, who never misses. And hi, Nigel McComb, who's a regular, and Anne Kirk and Evelyn Brown. Lovely to have you. Good evening, Jim Poole. Hi, Mark Agnew and Maureen Robinson. Hello, Fiona Hawkins, Jordan, and fond memories of the Westy. Mark, you might have been here this night. I'm going to read about now. In the 1970s. Hi from Lucy and Zoe. I'm glad you're loving Breadboy as well, Ali. Hello, Francis McGrath. Hi, Sadie, and the lovely Leslie is here, and Amy Nolan from the US. And hi, Alan McLean. Ian Parsley. I'm glad you're enjoying this, Gary Wilson. Hello, Brenda McMeekin. It's bringing back memories for you. Glad to hear that. Michael McKinley Sr. Good to have you again, Michael, from across the Atlantic. And hello, Brendan Toll and Jim Livingstone, Lynn Hamilton, Mark Burgess. Hello, Ruth Blevins. Hello. Oh, there's my lovely, great. It's my Auntie Dot. She's Auntie Doris in the books, so it's lovely to have my Auntie Dot along this evening. She is a legend. And hello, Nave. Good evening to you. Hello, Andy McCauley and Robert Briscoe. I'm glad you're enjoying it, Michael McKinley and Susan Craig. Glad you're joining it live. Susan Craig says, haven't missed a chapter yet. That's brilliant. Oh, I'm glad to hear that. Hi, Davy Dunwoody. Hope you're all doing well there. And good evening to Norma Sloan. So anyway, we will return to 1977 at the Westy Disco. And I've just decided that I want to dance on the dance floor like John Travolta. I jumped up from the tuck shop table and walked across to the middle of the dance floor. I tried to walk dead sexy like John Travolta. I'd never before seen anyone march down a street less like an orange man. I tried to strut all cool and swagger like Travolta, but it was difficult to pull it off because the chewing gum kept sticking to my platform shoes. In my enthusiasm to hit the dance floor, I bumped into my wee brother, causing him to spill his sherbet dip all over the floor. Whenever sherbet made contact with freshly spat out chewing gum on the floor of the Westy Disco, it fizzled like an experiment in my chemistry class. I had been secretly practicing the dance moves from Night Fever in front of the big mirror in my parents' built-in wardrobe in their bedroom. These rehearsals had improved my dancing immensely, but one day my pointing hand knocked over the Spanish donkey my Uncle Freddie had brought us from the Costa Brava. The stuffed donkey flew across the bedroom, and when it collided with the wood chip wallpaper, its head snapped off. I hid the damaged donkey at the back of the wardrobe underneath old plastic handbags that smelt of perfume. For some time now, I'd been trying to slick back my hair like John Travolta. I made use of my baldy father's redundant 10-year-old jar of Brill cream from the back of the bathroom cupboard, but I still looked more like Fonzie than Travolta. Spurred on by the exciting prospect of my forthcoming trip to the ABC, I flicked my hair and strutted on to the Westy Disco dance floor, imagining I was John Travolta himself. Everyone except Titch and Philip followed me. My great moment was spoiled somewhat when my father stupidly put on Boney M, singing "Hooray, hooray, it's a holly holly day." I was too embarrassed to sit down again so soon after my big entrance, so I danced through the song half-heartedly and with a sneer on my face in case anyone watching suspected I was a Boney M fan. I ended up dancing in a circle beside Lynn McQuiston with the buck teeth, Sammy Reeves, who didn't wash much, Irene Maxwell, my big brother, and Irene's white handbag. My big brother did not attempt any Travolta moves at all. He just did his usual boot boy stomp in his Dr. Martens to show how hard he was. Lynn McQuiston had recently transferred her affections from Les McKeown from the Bay City Rollers to John Travolta. This was a good barometer, indicating that John was officially the new pop idol for teenage girls. As she boogied down to Boney M, I was amazed that not one article of Lynn's clothing was tartan. This would have been unthinkable even a year ago. Irene Maxwell was dancing much too enthusiastically beside me in her sequined boob tube, but she still had no boobs, even though she was old enough to grow some. Thankfully, my father eventually, for the 6th time that night, played Night Fever. Within seconds, the dance floor was full, just like when he put on Dancing Queen. I imagined I was John Travolta at a big disco in New York, and all the girls were about to gather round me in an adoring circle. But as I began to try to dance like Travolta, I noticed, with great surprise, that Sammy Reeves was doing all the moves much better than me or anyone else on the dance floor. Sammy was wearing a proper white suit, but it must have been his granda's because it was too big on him and it didn't have flares. He must have been to see the movie already, or he must have got the dance instructions from the Jackie Pull-Out special because he was brilliant. A circle of girls began to gather around him, just like with John Travolta in the clip from the movie, except the girls didn't dance too close to Sammy because of his BO and all. I was jealous of his dancing, but I wasn't too worried because I knew Sammy would never be real competition for girls until he started to have a bath, or at least began to use denim aftershave to cover up the fact that he was minging. I refused to give up, and as the Bee Gees screeched their way towards the chorus, I began to do my diagonal pointy thingamies in time with the music. This got me some welcome female attention. 2 of the girls from Sammy's circle began to dance towards me, and one of them wasn't wearing pink National Health glasses. Then Irene Maxwell stood in front of me and gazed up at me lovingly, like the blonde lady gazed up at the blind one with the UDA sunglasses in Peters and Lee. Irene was smiling right at me with her whole brace. She had never showed this much interest in me before, even when I had delivered her precious Jackie when I was a paper boy. My Travolta pointy diagonals had obviously been so impressive that she now looked upon me in a completely different way. If only Judy Carton could see me now, I thought she would be similarly captivated. As the last refrain of Night Fever approached, I was determined to win more girls from Sammy Reeves. He was sweating now and stinking even more, and consequently the circumference of his circle of girls was ever widening. I thrust myself into my most determined moves yet, when all of a sudden, my legs disappeared from beneath me. Suddenly, and with a crash, I found myself lying on my back on the sticky wooden floor while Night Fever continued above me. In the midst of my initial disorientation, I tried to work out what had happened. I couldn't possibly have slipped. The large clumps of chewing gum on which I now rested made slipping almost impossible. As I began to get up, I caught a brief glimpse between Irene Maxwell's legs of Titch McCracken and Philip Ferris running towards the boys' toilets in hysterical fits of laughter. As I got up to chase after the two wee bastards who had deliberately destroyed my performance, I noticed warm and sticky chewing gum were now attached to the backside of my jeans. My father Roussos and the floor cleared. He should have known better. As I rushed towards the boys' toilets, attempting to pull the chewing gum from my rear end, my big brother followed close behind, shouting, "Why are you feeling your own bum, you wee pervert?" I was grateful to Demis Roussos for blocking out the sound of these humiliating taunts. When I arrived at the door of the toilets, it was locked, and from inside I could hear Titch and Philip shouting and laughing uncontrollably like the Martian robots in the Smash advert. "Tony Travolta landed on his arse," guffawed Titch. "Saturday night bollocks," laughed Philip. I stomped back to the tuck shop table and sat down alone. This was typical of Belfast. If you were even nearly good at something, everyone tried to knock you down. Even if you were brilliant at something, nobody really liked it. They always said, "Ah, but." If you got your 11 plus, like very few of us on the Shankill, then they said, "Ah, but he'll never survive in grammar school." If someone got a brand new Ford Cortina, people would say, "Ah, but he couldn't afford a Ford Capri." And if someone got a good job in the bank, they said, "Ah, but he wasn't smart enough to be a doctor." When I told Titch that my family was going to Butlins in Mosney for Easter, he said, "Ah, but can you not afford Disneyland?" When I told Timothy Longsley at BRA that the Westy Disco might be going to London to get away from the Troubles for a week, he said, "Ah, but if you weren't we deprived plebs from up the Shankill, you wouldn't be going anywhere." These negative attitudes surrounded me like an army cordon in a riot. No one was ever allowed to become a big head in Belfast. You weren't allowed to be too good at anything. Nobody would let you. If you dared to excel at anything, then someone would slap you down sooner or later. My father called this behaviour begrudgery. He once said, "This country is full of nothing but a shower of begrudgers," and I agreed with him. But then he went and did it too. At the remotest indication of self-congratulation, my father would always remind me, "No son of mine is going to turn into no big head." Maybe this was why all the big heads left Belfast and never came back. Why would they want to come back to live in a place where you had to hide your talents? Sometimes I hated this city. It was a strange feeling because I loved the place. But these harsh attitudes squashed you down. I sometimes wondered if I should get out and join all the big heads across the water. I tried to get up from the table to go home early in the huffs and watch the two Ronnies, but I found I couldn't move. The chewing gum on the backside of my jeans had glued me to the chair. As I began to extricate myself from the sticky seat, I could just see the chewing gum on the back of my jeans stretching like stringy cheese on a pizza in an American movie. Just then, Irene Maxwell ran over, beaming with her newfound interest in me. "Never worry about them, they're just jealous wee shakes," she said. I appreciated the beauty of these words of consolation, but I didn't fancy her back. Erin got so close to my face, I could actually smell the potato, cheese and onion on her breath. She looked deeply into my eyes and said, "I thought you were brilliant, so I did. You've got lovely John Travolta hair and all." As she spoke, Erin began to give me an affectionate pat on the back, and I let her because I knew she was starting to adore me. But then she stopped suddenly and looked in horror at the palm of her hand. Warm, sticky chewing gum from the floor of the Westy Disco had made its way from my back to her hand, and she was horrified. "Disgusting!" she squealed and ran off in the direction of the girls' toilets. Auntie Emma stopped selling sweetie mice at the tuck shop for a second and looked at me questioningly, as if I'd done something on Erin to provoke this unfortunate reaction. "Never touched her," I said, holding up both hands to everyone who was now staring at me. I went redder than Titch McCracken. I looked down and momentarily noticed the word Philip Ferris had just carved into the tuck shop table. It said, "Punk." I was surprised because Philip had never before expressed an affiliation with any musical movement. I got up and left the Westy Disco, sadly and alone, to the strains of Kate Bush's Wuthering Heights. I was squandered and nobody cared. It wasn't fair. I was stuck in Belfast, where you weren't allowed to be a good dancer or be a big head or be brilliant at anything. I was stuck in this hateful city as firmly as the chewing gum to the floor of the Westy Disco. I was fed up, so I was. So there you are. That's chapter 3 of Breadboy. So I'm going to say hello to a few people. Hello there, Lauren Elizabeth and Jeremy Skillen and Thomas Lynham. Good to have you all along this evening. I hope you enjoyed that chapter. I'm taking a wee break for the next couple of nights, but I'll be back on Monday night with chapter 4 of Breadboy. I've also let you know that if you want to watch the previous readings from Paperboy, you can scroll down my Facebook page, or you can also have a look on my YouTube channel. So I'm going to be uploading them all on YouTube, my Tony Macaulay YouTube channel as well, if you want to watch them again. In the meantime, until next Monday, stay home, stay well, and of course, stay positive.